Hello, everyone. It's so great to have you here at the Welcome to Wrexham Spotlight panel. My name is Joaquin Elizondo, and I am the creator and host of the Hollywood Editing Mentor program and podcast. And I'm so thrilled to speak with the Emmy-nominated editors of this wonderful project. Excited to have here Charles Little, the second ACE.
That is correct. That is me, Joaquin. Great to be here. Thanks a lot for having us all.
Great to have you here. Mohammed El Manasterli.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Curtis McConnell.
Hey, what's up? Happy to be here.
And Michael Brown.
Hey. It's such a great opportunity to talk to you.
That's awesome. Well, great to have you here. Great to meet all of you. And of course, congrats on the Emmy nom.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Exciting. This is an open panel discussion to talk about your work on Welcome to Wrexham. So feel free to jump in at any time. I might call on someone to kick things off, but again, just kind of chime in when you need to. Well, first of all, before we start, do we go by football or soccer?
I think we should go by football, guys.
It's football.
Yeah, it's football.
Football. All right, because I can see already the comments here on the YouTube video. Oh, soccer, football.
We'll be there.
We're not trying to undo anything that's American. We're just trying to enhance it. That's all.
Right. No, I totally get it. I mean, I say football. So, So the first question is, many people have deep connections, obviously with their sports teams. How much of fan culture inspired your work on Welcome to Wrexham? Michael, we'll start off with you.
Sure. I mean, being a fan myself, I think, growing up, rooting in Missouri, I was a big baseball fan, and it sort of becomes the identity for your region. And so I think, getting into Wrexham, I think there's a lot of, similarities between, and probably more so because it's such a smaller community. But the fan experience was one of the things that, we wanted to portray in this documentary series, to really highlight the passion and the love and telling the story of this town who, essentially had to step in and save their own club, with putting their own money in the game. So it was a, really great opportunity to do that and be able to tell their stories.
So the Wrexham Club is like the heartbeat of the town. It brings all the people together like no other. It creates a sense of camaraderie and culture, and they love their football team madly. There's some sense of unconditional love. They keep cheering for their team even if they're losing. And to me, it was something very inspiring, and it's something that we were all very keen to portray in the whole show.
And I just want to piggyback on what Mohammed said. Now, we called him Misho. It's a kind of
yes, that's right.
Correction. So you guys may hear us call him Misho, but we're talking about Mohammed when we do that. For me, I got on this series earlier on, and then left, and then came back to the series as an editor. There are incarnations of Welcome to Wrexham that never made it to air because, we started shooting and cutting, this series during the pandemic. And for me, in the editor's chair, the audience, the people of that town, that was the real hook that sucked me in. And it basically had jurisdiction over everything I did. Even when we were cutting, the match sequences, the actual voice actually playing the game, I think I can speak for us all when I say I think we were all really serving the town as much as Rob and Ryan were in their whole move to buy the team, as much as the players were, especially, the new players that came on, the more established players that came down from higher leagues, Ollie Palmer and Paul Mullen and that kind of stuff. So that stayed true for me all the way through. It was kind of my barometer when I was cutting scenes.
I'll also just say, just like as the fandom in the town and stuff goes, there's a few continents represented here in this group. Myself, I grew up in Southern Africa, Nishu in Northern Africa and Egypt, and there is something about sports, very specifically football, that has this sort of like almost an ancient grip on people that I don't know that a lot of Americans fully understand, like the depth that a sport like this lives in terms of just like identity. You know, this is not just like, oh, we wear our team's colors because, you know, we're proud and we're rooting for them. Like, this is like, no, this is like who we are as people. And I think it's so well represented in the town of Wrexham. You know, it's a town that has been really hard pressed and just beaten down for decades. And like the one symbol of hope, like their church in this town is the race course, which is the stadium. And it's the team, like they are the clergy for their whole town and everything. And there's just like a sort of sacredness to the sport. And, you know, and it's a unifying factor. It's the thing that, like, you know, everybody, no matter what your occupation is in life or wherever you are, it's like, that's like the one place where everybody comes together. Everybody is equal. And as Charles was saying, like, I think that we all had a constant sense of obligation to the town, to do the town justice and to serve the people, and really like present them in a way that is honoring them and their traditions and their culture, while at the same time still being honest and being truthful to the story.
Yeah, I mean, how would you describe the energy of like football fans, you know, and also I guess seeing this footage and maybe how that influenced your edit in a way, or maybe in the rhythm, pacing, the sound?
Oh, it's wild, man. They give us so much. It's so great.
The one word that comes to mind for me with that is tribal. Straight tribal. I mean, the Wrexham people, when they talk, the way they even speak, it sounds like, it makes me, you know, I get like fucking, and then you see them play, and yeah, tribal. That was my word. You know, Michael Brown. You know, Michael cut a lot of the. Well, everybody cut the game sequences, but I was kind of usually a big fan of Michael's sequences, and that was what it was for me. Very tribal. You know.
You know, and a lot of the music, you know, we used a lot of, you know, we selected a lot of tracks that had a heavy drum rhythm, this marching beat. You know, every week it's almost like, you know, the sort of sound that is like echoing through the hills, you know, and like everybody hears the sound, and it's like, you know, they all assemble, they all march to this place in town that is their central community. Like Curtis said, it's the only equivalent is church, you know, and it's this gathering spot. And, you know, the closer that they got to the stadium, it seems like the more amped up they get. And then they walk through, you know, they walk into the tunnels, and they take their seats that some of them have had for, you know, 20 seasons. They've had the same seat, you know, and their season tickets. And it just, you know, it's their release, you know, for the week. And, you know, that they're, you know, if it's a very blue collar town, you know, this is their entertainment. This is, you know, where they go to have their release and live through the town, and, you know, win or loss, you know, it's get up and do it again the next week.
So we had a big challenge with the games, is that we had so many games, and it feels kind of repetitive for you as an editor sitting with this footage. And you always had to be creative to put a spin on every game, because it has to feel different. So we always had to find the theme for every match. And usually it's like a story theme or a character's theme. Sometimes it's exciting and upbeat, and sometimes it's suspense. Sometimes it's much more reflective. So this is one of the things that we're always trying to be creative and find different ways to tell the story.
Yeah. And when you watch those sports sequences, what I was always amazed with was the way we would tease out whether their dragons, you know, won or lost the match. We kept the suspense, or we kept the interest beyond what the score was, whether they were winning or losing. Well, mostly when they were losing. You know, sometimes when the match is going to lose, you can be like, they're done. That was one of the things I was really proud of, you know, of the team, that we were always conscious of telling the story beyond just the game, and making sure that we kept the viewer on the hook for that particular story. And in my opinion, you know, the audience in the stands, they were a big tool for us doing that, but the players as well. And and going back and forth to the coaches, to Phil Parkinson and Steve, that commentary, and then even the commentators too. The commentators gave great insight that was layers deeper than just the score on the pitch.
Well, yeah, because that was our main guy, Mark Griffiths. I mean, he's been doing this for I don't know how long, and so it's like it always felt to me like he was as much a part of that team as any of the players were too.
Yeah, and I mean, to something that Charles was referencing is, the games and the matches themselves, what happened on the pitch directly was going to influence the next scene of one of our characters, whether it be a character on the team or a character of one of the people that was living in the town. Something that happened in that match was going to drive the next piece of the story. And so, we made sure to really, focus our attention on the matches to help, continue our storyline to drive us to the next scene. And I think that, with a story like this, when you have the town characters, the team characters, the coaching staff, the players, there's the groundskeepers, all of that was like this beautiful symphony that was happening week after week after week in this footage. And, much credit to our story producers that are going through and combing through this stuff as well, because, there's a lot of material to get through. And, they were so instrumental in flagging, some of these moments that could help these decisions along.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
As editor mentors too, I just want editors to know, especially newer ones coming up, or editors that are transitioning or, shifting or whatever. When it's done really well, it can be quite thankless. When you sew it in really well, people don't notice those intricacies that Michael's talking about. It was all very intentional. And when it's done right, and it's so intentional, you just roll with it. It's one of the things that really pushed me, in the editor's chair, was working with them, because their standards as editors was always so high. So when I'm cutting a scene and it's there, I'm like, no, it's got to be all the way up here, because Curtis and Misho and Michael, they're really pushing, they're really digging. And to Michael's point, we've got story producers, and we're in communication with the directors out in the field as well. Yeah, it was all hands on deck. But I just wanted burgeoning editors to realize that is a part of what we do. When you do it really well, maybe no one will tell you.
Well, speaking of managing all these storylines and feelings and emotions, I mean, how do you manage the deep personal moments, high energy game sequences, and the comedic notes throughout the series?
I like to give an example of the stone skipping, when you hold a flat stone and throw it in the water, and it has to jump on the surface equally. And that's how we do it. And I think that's the secret sauce of the show, where you're jumping between these different emotional beats throughout the show and not stay in one beat for very long. And this makes the show entertaining and intriguing and keeps the audience invested in it.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I'd also just say that there was also an aspect of us being able to just show what already exists. There is a quirkiness to the town of Wrexham that does not require us to put a bunch of Benny Hill music underneath and be like, hey, look, we're being funny. You can just sort of let a scene play out. And these guys, there is such an intrinsic, often kind of dark humor that they just sort of is just sort of a part of their own culture and the way that they speak to each other. And it's there's scenes where it's just let it play out. Let these guys just have a conversation. And it was riveting. Also, buried in that too, there is also this natural, I don't want to call it vulnerability, but almost the sort of comfort with just sort of, these guys have lived with so much heartbreak for decades. And you feel that, they're not trying to put on a show for you, because they're who are these people? We don't have anything to prove, they're just going to break our hearts or whatever. So there's also a certain openness that might not be very familiar, especially in kind of more American culture where we feel like, oh yeah, we have to put on airs and all this sort of stuff. So I just like want to credit, well, it's obviously crediting the people of Wrexham themselves, but then also like our field crew, like our field producers, these guys that were like interviewing them and just making them comfortable enough to be able to open up and just, and just kind of like lay themselves out there in whatever form they're in. That was a big part for me.
The other thing I would also mention in terms of the comedy, we have two fantastic superstar, megastar comedian, actors who bring everything to the table in regards of ideas, and the things that they brought to the table obviously is just immeasurable. With Ryan and Rob, they walk into the room and it's funny. Their ideas was really inspiring to kind of see the stuff that they come up with and how they wanted to take this format and this reality series and sort of break it a little bit, differently than a show like this normally would play out. And I think that they had fun also working in this format as well.
But bringing it back to editors, the editors have to handle it right. I know a lot of times when we talk, we see riveting performances, but it has to be cut right. You have to get out of the way at the right time. You have to be a little heavy-handed with it at the right time. And, Curtis will give a lot of credit to the material and to the people cutting it because he's compassionate that way. But I'm just a big fan of the choices he makes, how he gets out of the way when it's time to get out of the way, how Michael will grab a scene and just roll you into the music and just really push your heartstrings. Misha, same deal, So I'm a big editor fan, not to take anything away from the performers and all that stuff, but I think a great performance, if it's not cut right, you can mess it up.
Thanks, Charles.
No, you're welcome.
Well, speaking of like editing process, I mean, what is your how do you go about, I say, finding these maybe, golden nuggets, these moments that you kind of latch onto and follow and explore? And when do you know that you find these golden moments? What's that feeling like when you're like, all right, this is worth pursuing and I'm going to explore this a little bit?
I mean, for me, I think it's that when I'm watching footage and I have my own visceral reaction, whether I laugh out loud, or have some sort of feeling of an emotional beat, or, it's almost that feeling of like, I don't know if I want to compare it so much to like a meme or something that you see on Instagram, but that thing that you want to share with somebody else. When you come across that in a piece of footage and I'm like, I want to share this with somebody else, needs to see this moment because I want them to have the same feeling that I just had. And then if we can add to that moment, with music or, and build it into something, I think that's, like what Charles was saying, that's the craft, and that's what we all love to do. But those moments, those are just, it's like, panning for gold, and you see that little shine and you're like, all right, I got something, that's the part of the process that I love, is that discovery as well.
Well, I mean, in Welcome to Wrexham, we also see Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney feel the pressure to do the team justice. How much did that impact your work on the series?
That was big. Because this series had a lot of access, is the word I used. The series had a lot of intimate access into those actors' real homes and into their real lives. That was something that was lucky for us to have, and we needed to work that the right way, so that it gave the audience enough access that was authentic, but still served the story. It wasn't access just for the sake of access to a star's house. Rob and Ryan, they're regular people. They didn't want to be portrayed as some stars coming in off the street, and they had to earn it.
I will also say it's probably a little less sexy, but like one of the things, at least for me, when I came onto the show, that our showrunner John Hennian really pushed for was make mistakes, try things out, make mistakes, fail, because that's how we're going to succeed at this. And so there was a lot of freedom to just try things out. And, we did not, or at least me, I will speak for myself. I did not come in with this, super expert knowledge or whatever on like how to thread that needle perfectly. Like that line came because we tried things out, messed up, and like, oh no, that does not feel right, and then we go back and then we try it a different way, and that doesn't quite feel right until you just polish it until you find that sweet spot. So like, again, we were trying really hard to not be exploitative in any sort of way. We could probably go back and look at some of our old cuts of some of these scenes and be like, ugh, that does not feel like the show, or like I didn't, but like, again, we were also collaborative and noted each other and had conversations about it. And, like we eventually kind of just honed those story beats in. And I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of talking. It's a lot of cutting and recutting and just finding it. But, it takes time. Like editing is not always the sexiest thing.
No, and to his point, the communication's big. We're post-pandemic. We used to walk down the hall, knock on somebody's door, and take a look at something with somebody. You have to make a conscious effort right now to be collaborative. It takes respect and takes a little bit of patience. But I think that was one of the biggest deals. And that, like Curtis said, that stemmed all the way from the top, from our showrunners, John Hinian and Alan Bloom, and the people in the field. Everybody was super communicative. If you look online, if you search Welcome to Wrexham or Welcome to Wrexham crew or production and stuff, you'll see it. You can see all the social media pictures. Everybody's like together. We're in groups. It's really wide open. I think that, that permeates through the show, and it came from, that's the same way in Wrexham. Those people are that way. So yeah, it's important. Editors need to make certain that they're making a conscious effort, in my opinion, today to really still be collaborative, even in these remote workflows that we happen to be in since the pandemic.
Yeah, collaboration. And I think also communication was very important because that's a serialized show, and you have all these characters throughout 18 episodes. And when you get a note to restructure something, it's like a domino effect. It affects everything else. So I always had these meetings constant, like three times a week. And if any big structural change happens somewhere, everyone needs to be aware of and start to change their episodes accordingly. So yeah, communication was one of the biggest things that we leaned on.
Yeah.
And I will say also one of the things that was really, nice, and maybe I haven't had this as much on other productions, but the network and Rob and Ryan were always willing to keep pushing for that betterness, like to keep honing it, keep grinding on it, and even if that meant, it was going to affect some episodes down the line, it's like, we'll get to that, but it's all worth it in the end. And I really appreciated that level of care. A lot of times, you don't get that. It's kind of like, well, we've got time's ticking. Let's just get it out the door. And this project it never felt that way working on this, that it was always pushing to be better and better.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of speaking about collaboration, and it's great to hear about your process. And what is it like though when you are working remotely, maybe say versus working in office? Because oftentimes, especially from like assistants, I get asked, well, how do I learn now? How do I get mentored? And so kind of speaking a little bit about that, but also just as editors, working remotely, how can we can still collaborate and communicate? This medium like Zoom.
Yeah, like working remotely was the best thing that happened to my career, honestly. Like instead of me like driving 45 minutes to go sit in a room on my own and then drive back 45 minutes, now I can wake up early, work out, and start working. And I think like there is good communication. We use Slack all the time. You just text what you need. You don't need to walk to the room and just chat for 15 minutes. Most of the time, most of what you're saying is not related to what you actually wanted in the first place. There's some kind of focus that happens when you're working remotely. Your communications are very distinct. And I feel like I don't feel I'm missing anything. Like I do my work. If the director wants to do notes, we share screen, we do the notes. And if at any point we need to sit together to do some changes, I can drive to the office at this time to do it. but I believe like working remotely has been great to me.
Yeah, it's been great, but we did get together though. This group, literally, we got together outside. We would get together and have food or have just a couple of drinks, and we talked about the show. We did vibe out, not all the time. And it's to Mohammed's point, it's been a real blessing for us because, as editors, we're sitting there in the chair for 12 hours, sometimes 14 hours, and we don't get to see our families, and we're just in that dark hole. So yeah, he's right. We are enjoying the remote workflow, but I know with this group, we earned it. We've got together at least 3 or 4, if not 5 times. And I think it made all the difference.
Just to speak, Joaquin, what you were just saying about like assistant editors and like people that are kind of starting out and struggling with trying to figure it out. I would say the work from home presents an opportunity for assistant editors in particular to like really shine. On this show, we had some of the most amazing AEs, and it was because we could put in a request and it was like an immediate response. They were so on top of it. They were so like just bam, bam, bam right there, to the point where like there were a couple that like I really bonded with and started handing off scenes and like, hey, you want to take a stab? Like they were communicative with me and expressed like, oh yeah, like this is what I want to do. I want to follow in your guys' footsteps. And I was like, all right, well, let's get you going. Here's a scene. Like, let's work together. Like, I'll give you notes on it, whatever. And I mean, since then, I've tried as much as I can to like bring those AEs with me, trying to get them into those like junior editor or editor positions. Because, like at the end of the day, somebody did that for me. Somebody took a risk on me when I was starting off, and we need to just keep paying it forward. But the work from home thing, I think, is an opportunity for an AE to be like, I'm going to show you that I will be there 100% all the time for you. And like whatever you need, and keeping a good attitude about it too. That's the other key, is like, you can pick up when somebody is like, and complaining or whatever, like, so yeah, yeah, you're right about attitude. Attitude is the most important thing, even for editors, and even like especially in hard times when you have like this cut that everyone thinks that it's great, but then you get notes to tear it apart from the studio or from the director or whatever, and people start be like, oh, I don't want to do this, or that's too much work. I mean, that's not the right attitude. You should always be positive and happy and have a smile on your face, and think that this is going to be for the best. And this is what happened with Welcome to Wrexham. We had like so many different cuts and so many different structures and versions, and reimagined the show so many different times. And at the end, we were able to create something really special.
The other thing I was just going to mention about, people coming up is, I remember, when I was first as an assistant, going and knocking on an editor's door to ask a question seemed very intimidating. Like the music's playing, you don't want to, you feel like you're walking in on something. Now I feel like with Zoom and doing, having the ability to just push a button, and if they're busy, they'll answer. If not, it seems very much easier, I feel like, to communicate if you're an assistant coming up, to be able to reach out to an editor really quickly, have a quick Zoom call. It doesn't take this big grand gesture, so I'm hopeful that it keeps going for sure.
I mean, I agree with everything you said, and very interesting points. And like I tell people, just because we're now working remotely, most of us are. I mean, we can still learn, and get mentored. I mean, maybe the technology is different, but I think just everyone there's an opportunity to just shine more maybe now. So really, really, really like that insight. Can you each tell us a little bit about your favorite sequence for the series and how it fit into the overall story?
I mean, I can start. I really like the sequence that we had in the finale episode. The moment in which we sort of realized what the conclusion of the season is, what the result of their last game and their fate for the season is. And it was this beautiful piece that Curtis was able to work on. Just before the last goal is scored against Wrexham, we cut away to one of our town characters, Annette, and it's just this moment of quiet and peace and tranquility. Yet you also are realizing that they lost. She's packing away her shirts for the year. She's packing them into her drawers. And, she is telling you how she's feeling about the end result. And I just thought Curtis did a really beautiful job. And for it being one of the moments when you finally realize, after all of these episodes, after all of this buildup of the year, you realize what their fate is and it's sinking in. I just think that was handled so beautifully.
No, yeah, it was. And that goes back to my original comments about cutting. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. The way he cut that particular sequence, you gotta watch the last episode of season 1, Welcome to Wrexham, Do or Die, in order to really experience it.
Yeah, throughout the show, we were editing between Rob and Ryan and the fans and the players. And we had arcs throughout the show for all these characters. And yeah, this last episode was where we're concluding all of these stories. And our showrunner, John Hennion, came with this idea of concluding their stories within the last game, which was like the final game of the season, which was the game that they were working towards, or either they're going to get promoted or no. And we were able to create like a parallel editing between concluding these characters and this really epic game. And it was very challenging to find the right moments to when to be in the game and when to cut to the character reflecting or on like concluding their story, not just concluding their stories, but also reminding the audience of what his journey was all about and how it's ending right now, and creating a balance to tell this part of the story needed so much time and so much minds, and all of us pitched into doing this, and each one of us was able to craft a certain layer to make it a really special piece, I think.
Yeah, and that goes back to the collaborative thing. I mean, I sometimes I would work on a sequence, I would work on, pieces of sequences, pieces of scenes, and then see them later. They had been absorbed into another scene by one of the other editors. And I would be like, damn, that was pretty cool. So yeah, that's the good. Again, if you're lucky enough to be in a collaborative environment, and I think you should be, because this particular medium is a collaborative medium. Although editing can be a solitary, craft and practice at times, but overall, the process of filmmaking, it's a collaborative one. Maybe one of you guys can help me. Can anybody help me remember where did they put the sequence when we win, Rob's not there, and oh my gosh,
Humphrey
calls,
or Sean or Humphrey or Sean.
No, Humphrey calls from the field. He calls from the field, and he says, "There's a lot of happy people here." And Rob, is on the phone, and he hands the phone to Phil, and Phil's like, "Do you like that, Rob?" And Rob's like, "No. Does anybody remember what episode that sequence ended up in?"
What was that?
Damn, I don't know if it was 115 or 116.
Yeah, it was towards the end.
That was one of my favorite sequences because we won. We were at the top of the league. We had all this insane. That was a sequence that I worked on. We had all this insane madness from the audience, from the townspeople, and that was like the sea of the stadium, the race course, just jumping and bumping. But Rob and Ryan were not there. And we were able to use, people were walking around with masks holding up Rob over their face and Ryan over their face. They had banners of Rob and Ryan. And we cut to those to bring Rob and Ryan into the scene. We used a piece of, interview bite from, Sean Harvey, the team, one of the team execs, saying, "Oh, I wish they could be here. These are the type of moments that Rob and Ryan," and then we cut it in and we utilized Humphrey's conversation and then Phil. So Rob and Ryan weren't there, but they were there, and that was a challenge. And that was one sequence that I thought was really emotional. It was really great. It was really cool to show Rob and Ryan's authenticity without them having to be standing in the box. You know what I mean?
So I rewatched the last episode last night, just in preparation, like for this. And I hadn't watched it in a few months, and man, it's such a good episode. And I'm saying that like out of respect to all of us. Like as I was watching, I texted the guys and I was like, the part where the whole townsfolk, where they're like walking, like the whole entrance into the stadium and everything. And I was like, it's so good. I was like, I don't remember who cut it, but it was great. And it ended up being Michael. But just like, there's so many just like these like very fun little subtle like themes that are just kind of like very gently sort of like placed in there. Like, again, if you watch the beginning of the episode, Michael's whole thing about like this church or the race course being like the church or whatever, and you're hearing this sort of like this choral, music underneath, where it's just like it's these like beautiful voices that you'd be hearing in church, and you're seeing the preparation, and it feels very sacred and everything, like this whole process, and it and that carries through when you get into the stadium. I don't know, it's like it's such a beautiful feeling. And again, it's like if I was just watching this purely as like a viewer completely unrelated to it, there's little subtleties like that probably I wouldn't even necessarily notice. But knowing these guys, I'm like everything's intentional. There's a purpose for every little micro decision. So yeah, I mean, look, that whole sequence I thought was incredible. There was another one. I'm in a similar place with Charles, where I'm having trouble remembering which episode it was. I know it was like one of the last ones because it was a very significant match. I think it was the game where it determined whether they were being automatically promoted or not. It was an away game. Was not necessarily like the best coverage that we had of all of the other games because it's an away game. It's a little more tricky with the access and all that. But it was a match where they lost, and it was you felt in that episode like just how important that match was to them, because they could potentially just skip over the playoffs and just automatically get promoted. And like it was another sort of do or die type of moment. But at the very end, the team loses and the team is like, their shoulders are dropped and everybody's like sad or whatever, and like the entire supporters section is just like cheering as if they had just won. And it was like, and they did not stop. Like if we went back to the raw footage,
115, that's not 115,
113,
115.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. The team, like, they're showing their respect to their fans or whatever, but then they leave the field, and this crowd, like, I timed it out, it was like 12 minutes where they did not stop. Like, they would not leave the stadium. They were just jumping up and down and singing and cheering. And it was just like, it was the most beautiful thing. And that was like just purely like the raw footage, not even like us editing anything. So yeah, I mean, that was just like, just a sort of emotional trigger.
No, yeah, that was a good one. I actually cut that one. But Henyon too. Henyon leaned in on that too. He kind of spearheaded that whole like, oh, this should happen. I mean, to your point, it was definitely inspired by what actually really happened. But yeah, I remember Paul Mullen like really walking toward the audience. They were moved. And the announcer, he said it too. He made a comment like, they're not going to let him leave the field without knowing blah 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 how much they love him. Yeah, it was. That was a great sequence. And those are the sequences that kind of fed toward this ultimate sequence in 118 in the finale episode. That 118 is 118 because all the episodes prior to it were what they were. The best of the best came out in that last episode. You don't have to know anything about football or nothing to love that episode. That's so great.
That's sorry, go ahead.
There's Wrexham versus Chesterfield, and this. Remember when I talked about how every match was about a certain theme, and this theme was mainly legacy. And we're cutting between the match and one of our fans, Scoot, who was getting his chemotherapy. And while he's getting his chemotherapy, he was reflecting on the years that he's been going to the games for Wrexham. And remember going with his brother and his friends and his father. And then he ends his dialogue saying that he doesn't want to die before he sees Wrexham getting promoted. And then
totally said that. That's insane. You're totally right.
Yeah, and then we cut to Paul Mullen talks about how life becomes a memory instantly and how you have to live the best out of it. And he says the best thing that he does, the best thing that he loves about his work is that he creates these amazing memories for his fans and he builds a legacy and then he scores. I think this is one of the strong moments that we have in the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
But speaking of these sequences, I mean, like, when do you know that you've nailed it, right? As an editor, like when is that moment? Like, what's that feeling where you're like, you know what, we got this. My work is done. You're high-fiving each other. I mean, when do you know that you actually have finished editing?
I'm still waiting for that moment.
I was going to say the same thing. I don't know that I've ever felt done with a sequence. Like, it always feels like I just want to keep going. So, if that moment could come soon, like that would be great.
Yeah, it's like when you meet the deadline and there are no more notes. Basically, that's
it. Clock runs out.
It's when I'm alone and I'm cutting and I'm crying. I got a lump in my throat. I go from the lump to a smile because I'm like, damn, that was good. It's always just about the emotional reaction for me. And if I'm busting up laughing or I'm choked up and I'm in here by myself and it's late at night, sometimes when I look around because I want to, there's nobody to talk to, and I go, all right, that's pretty good.
Something that I do, and I started doing this a few years ago, is when I get close to feeling like an episode is at a place that I would be proud of it to be seen. As I watch it, I'll sit, at night, I'll watch the episode 4 or 5 different times just in a row. And every time I watch it, I'm watching it from a different perspective. I'm watching it from my grandmother's perspective. How would she look at this episode, and what things would she like, and I'm watching it from that perspective. And, then from, somebody who wants to play football, growing up, what are they seeing in this episode? And I try to put different eyes and see this episode in all those. And if I feel like those people are satisfied in some way, hypothetically speaking, then I feel like I feel like I can feel proud of what's been done.
I would say, so this is a real, almost in the weeds sort of thought. When, if a cut is exported and sent off or whatever, I think it's a very smart idea to watch your cut on a phone and then also on a TV if you can, like AirPlay it or whatever. Getting those two perspectives, getting like a big version as well as a small version, there's little things that jump out at you that are going to be different between those two perspectives. So yeah, I mean, I try to do that as much as I can. Obviously, you're also going to hit a point where you're like, I'm sick of editing. I need to just step away from all of this footage for a little while. And sometimes that's what you need. And you come back and then you're seeing here's all these little things that just need to be tweaked. But yeah.
But that's a great tip, because it kind of reminds me of say, audio mixers where when they say go to listen to their mix on a car stereo.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of reminds me of that.
Yep. Same sort of idea.
Rick Rubin does that at his place up in Malibu. He has a bus. But he's right. You gotta change, and especially now because people are experiencing what we create on different different size screens and different scenarios. So that makes sense. And when you can watch it on your phone and it's still good, yeah, you're right. You should know it's good, I think.
Well, I guess, when that happens, say when you watch it, say on a TV and a phone, have you then gone off and made changes because of that viewing experience?
Oh, pretty much every time, at least for me. Because when you're watching on your phone, typically, you watch it without headphones or with headphones, you're going to hear different things. And not even an audio mistake, but just that just the pacing feels just slightly off that you weren't picking up when you were just editing at your computer. It's so strange because it does feel like pacing changes depending on how you're watching it. And as soon as you can kind of find a synchronicity between all of your different ways that you're taking in the medium, it starts feeling like, oh, okay, now it's starting to feel right.
Yeah, and to Michael's earlier point too, I think you need a little bit of time. You're done cutting something, you should watch it the next day or watch it much later. after 5-6 hours have passed or a full half a day has passed, and you'll smell and feel slight differences, and you'll want to make adjustments.
Well, did you learn something, say, about the sport of football from working on this series, or did you really bring that experience, say, from knowing about the sport to the show?
I'll let Curtis take that one.
Look, I've been a football fan since I was a kid. Didn't grow up in this country, so it's the non-American sports are very much a part of my upbringing and my culture. At the same time, I was not that familiar with the English Football League outside of the Premier League. So learning about all of these different tiers, the whole structure, there's a lot to take in. But then there's a lot of things that I felt like my prior knowledge that I was able to bring to it, like insight just in, how things are playing out or whatever. We would sometimes compress a lot of this gameplay and just kind of be creating more of like emotional arcs and that sort of stuff. But at the same time, it was also like, you can't have that moment before this moment, because that would not make sense. Like, to somebody that actually enjoys watching football, like, that doesn't make sense. That said, that was also sometimes a hindrance for me, because I would want to play things out just more of a sort of play by play. And, our showrunner would come in and be like, don't get caught up in that, man. Just create an atmosphere, just create an emotional beat. Like, just give us like that really fun, sexy football passing and tackling, and just make it fun to watch. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And so I'd have to just get out of my own way and try it out. And then I was like, yeah, you were right. It works.
I learned a ton. I did not know a lot about soccer or football, and now when I watch a game, I know a lot more. I can watch a football game much differently now after cutting Welcome to Wrexham, especially listening to Phil and Steve in the locker room, listening to the coaching and using terminology like crosses and be better than the man in front of you, and it was a big learning thing for me. I learned a ton. Being that closely intimate with all that play. I watch completely differently now. I'm much more informed football watcher after working on the show.
I grew up playing soccer, and up until high school, and baseball and other sports like that. I think one thing that's interesting is, I also was in band as well, in marching band, and there's a lot of similarities in the coaching that goes on, like in the drum. I was in the drum line. There's a lot of similarities between the dedication to excellence. And, so I really appreciated seeing that sort of mentality from the top down. How do you turn a team that has not been good for 15 years? How do you get that how do you get them to turn over, in just a matter of a couple of years? And, I think that regimented beat is something that I brought to, we had a lot of drum line sort of inspired tracks that we used. There's like this kind of marching through the season that went on, throughout the season. And, that's, the English football system is something that I actually pretty underestimated, because I followed Barcelona, most of the bigger international clubs, in the Champions League. And I got to say, I have a whole new respect for the EFL and knowing where these clubs come from and how much it means to be in the Premier League, and that it's such an earned position. So I gained a lot more respect for that league after this.
Well, that's cool. Misha, what is it? Is it big over there? Is it big in Egypt?
Yeah, it's very popular. But I wasn't a big fan of soccer, honestly. I played water polo 8 years of my life, so I can relate.
Oh, you did? I did too.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
There you go.
It was a big part of my life, so I relate a lot to the sense of camaraderie and culture and togetherness, and working on a common goal. And the idea of like scoring a goal is a lot of effort before you reach that. And I think this was a huge inspiration for us working together as a team, where you create all these layers and other editors come and put their thought in it, and another editor come and put their thought in it. And the way we worked, not just that these guys are amazing and what they do, but we're like-minded. And there's this idea of like, if a scene is not broken, don't try to fix it. So we amplify it, and we only fix the things that need fixing. And for example, if I get like an episode from Curtis that I really like certain scenes in it, and I get notes on the episode, and I like certain scenes, I make really good effort to preserve these scenes that I really liked, and at the same time take care of the notes. So I think this way of thinking and way of dealing with each other was very successful for the show.
I didn't know that he was thinking that way, because that helps me understand. It kind of helps me understand a little bit more how we even put it together. Because what a lot of folks don't know is, the structure changed a lot along the way, and I mean, I know it sounds like it was all rosy for us editors because we're all so excited about the show, but it was tough too. I mean, we spent some long nights, and we had some raw conversations about what the hell, how are we going to do that? Because Rob and Ryan, like, Michael was saying, introduced different components, different elements. We were putting this comedic elements with this sophisticated sports elements, and then cutting this different culture on the whales, and then these what we used to call packages. I can't even use the term package anymore. I guess they're scenes. We went into these people's lives. But man, back to that last episode, the cross-cutting, flying in and out of the match, the final match of the season, and going into these players' lives and into their heads. That was the slickest thing. I had to keep trying to plug that episode. I know that's what it sounds like, but it's a dope episode. Y'all got to watch it. They really understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's this one other thing that I'd like to mention about like our camera crews and the amount of time they spent on the field with these characters, especially the fans, and the amount of time they took for the fans to really open their hearts. And they lived with them for a very long time for them to be able to give them their hearts. And it was very tricky cutting their scenes, because we had a lot of beautiful verite footage, and good verite footage is like gold, because this is real life, real people. But but at the same time, you have a show with very limited duration. And at the same time, you want to be true to these people, and you have all these different storylines. I think one of the hardest and trickiest things that we were able to do is to be able to really distill down their stories to the essence, to reach a point where you're able to tell their stories and create arcs for every episode and the whole show, and make it compelling and coherent, and not lose the amount of effort that our crew did and the openness that the fans gave to our crew.
Yeah, with only now half the runtime, to his point.
Exactly.
You had an hour before, so you could just swim in there and really dig into their hearts. Now you have 30 minutes, so now your sentence has to have less words, so you have to be more precise. That's
exactly. And this took a lot of work from our AEs and our amazing story producers to know these interviews by heart, to know all these scenes by heart, and going back and combing through and structuring and restructuring and find different lines and put things together and change, because every time the structure change, the meaning of the scene changed. So you have to find different bites in there to change the whole meaning of it. So it was this constant back and forth of it reiterating to make the scenes work throughout the bigger structure of the show.
Guys, well, it's been great to getting some insight here about the editing of Welcome to Wrexham. I have just one more question for all of you. I mean, for those people that are listening or watching it and that want to start an editing career and maybe even work on something like Welcome to Wrexham, I mean, what advice would you have for them?
I have a simple answer to that. And that is, for me, I say, no. I hope you have a favorite editor. I hope you have favorite films, favorite material that you feel resonates with you. Watch the credits, find the name of he, she, or them, and go look them up. Look them up, figure out look at their path, see how much information you can find about them online. see if they went to film school, see where they mentored, read articles and interviews from them, and learn about their path. And then, you might even be able to reach out to folks. You could reach out to folks like Curtis McConnell or myself or Misha or Michael. It's worth a shot. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to say no. But you got to remember, as far as an editor is speaking or is concerned, everybody was all at the same. We all started the same way. Even if you're born into this, you still start. You still have to figure out. It's like playing guitar. You can't be born and just play. You have to practice. You have to learn that craft. You have to learn that instrument. So that's what I say. Make sure you know who are your heroes, and try to let their path inspire your own. And then use the technology. There's no, we're not in a building anymore. We're not on the lot. So it's not as easy to come just try to work in the environment with us and get connected to us by osmosis. Now you have to specifically kind of target, entities and avenues to get in. But it's a wonderful profession. It's a wonderful craft. So yeah, that's my advice.
I would say, for those that are way starting out, not to denigrate college, but you don't have to go to college. There are options out there. There's the LinkedIn thing where they offer all the different courses. Avid has a free version, just so you can just learn the basics, get those really basic skills. When you have that, then it's just a matter of just work as hard as you can and be a good person. Those two things, the skills will come. The beginning of my career, I look back on that stuff and how did anybody hire me? But you hone your skills. And the reason that I kept working was because my showrunners, my producers, they liked working with me. And I would take advice, I would take criticism, and I would adjust, and you grow like that. And the whole time, just being a good person, not talking badly about your coworkers or anybody, and just doing your hardest to succeed. And I will also say, even if you're not thinking about being an editor, I recommend to anybody that is getting into this industry, whether you are wanting to be a director, a writer, an actor, learn the fundamentals of editing. It will inform everything about what you do. Across the board. It is, in my opinion, one of the most important skills for anybody, and it will give you a leg up in whatever career you choose within this industry.
Yeah, I would say start editing, with the technology now, everything is very accessible. Start editing and find your crew, collaborate, do art. If you're passionate about it, just keep doing it. Yeah. And build your crew. You can submit to festivals for short form or mobile festivals. There's a lot of these things right now. And just by getting into one festival and doing well, you will get hired. And as Curtis said, just be good to people. That's more important than the actual skill, because people spend a lot of time with us and they want to spend time with someone that they like. Even if you're so talented, and if you're not likable, you won't get hired. And creating a good cut is something good, but being able to get notes and work with other people's opinions and perspectives, and being able to execute their ideas within your cut, but at the same time preserving your own instinct and original ideas is a harder skill than actually building the cut. So it's a craft. It takes years and years to hone it. I learn every day, and every year I look back, I'll be like, oh my God, I learned so much. And it's very subtle, and it's like a sleight of hand, the more that people are not aware of your presence, the more successful you are.
I think also, these guys have all said, pretty much exactly my feelings on the matter as well. The one maybe more holistic thing that I think is very important for storytellers in general is just to get out there and experience life. Be curious about life. Be curious about different sports or different activities or hobbies. All of these things are things that build your color palette and allow you to have empathy, when you see footage and how to pick out good footage and all these things we're talking about, that, life experience, meet as many different types of people, communicate, build bonds, all of those things will help, your editing and your storytelling ability, go through the roof.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, just truly amazing advice, and appreciate all of you sharing that with the audience. And again, thank you for just sharing your experience working on, Welcome to Wrexham. And again, congrats on the Emmy nomination. But thank you to our panelists, Charles, Mohammed, Curtis, and Michael, for being here with us today to discuss their incredible work on Welcome to Wrexham.
We should also let folks know, where you can find us. We all have more projects coming out. We're all doing stuff. We're all constantly doing stuff. Sometimes even at the same time. But you can find me just at Charles Little, the number 2, on just any social media channel, at Charles Little, the number 2. We're definitely open books, and we don't want AI to convince people that that's all you need.
Oh man, that's another episode.
Bring that up, please.
Part 2. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, if you want to share your information, we'll definitely put it in the show notes. I'm sure definitely our audience will appreciate that. But also thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together, and to all of you for watching. And be sure to check out the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast app for the other panels in this series. See you next time.